conversations with journalists, messaging experts, designers, marketers, leaders, and managers, and unpack their wisdom and experience. Each episode is designed for strategic communicators looking to level up and advance their careers. I'm your host, Rochelle Bedell. Minjun Chen has a bachelor's degree in Chinese language and literature and master's degrees in learning sciences and technologies and human-computer interaction and design. She's worked as a UX designer for a variety of companies, including Wayfair, Amazon, and Microsoft. She is currently working for Spotify in user experience design, specializing in data visualization and reporting. In addition to her work in design, Minjun specializes in fine art, storytelling, presentation, career growth strategies, and product design interviews. Minjun, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to share my design journey and talk to you and share my experience with our audience. So happy to be here.
So happy to have you. So let's jump right into it. Can you tell us a little bit how you ended up in UX design, just kind of your background and how you worked into that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Firstly, I started knowing about the UX design in high school. So I got my first Apple product, which was an Apple Touch. And it was a very luxury gift from my parents because it was so expensive in Chinese yuan. I was so amazed by the design, the interface design and packaging design, so everything around that specific design of the Apple Touch. And at that time, I hear this major called human-computer interaction design, which is the user experience design. However, if I want to pursue this kind of career, I think I have to go to the United States to study design school student for this UX design degree. So I was thinking about it for a while, but I went to my college, which I major in Chinese literature and language. So it's a completely different degree than the UX design. However, I didn't forget this kind of dream. I started learning this kind of traditional design tool like Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign on my own. And I was looking for the design internship experience. It's more focusing on the graphic design. I work as a graphic design intern on the magazine and newspaper and doing a lot of editorial design and layout. So I think maybe I can apply to UX design school in the United States using the portfolio I had from this internship experience as a graphic designer. However, I failed. So I didn't know the specific reason, but looking back, maybe it's because of my personal statement, it's because of my portfolio. Since I never have the experience apply for the schools in the States, a completely different experience than what I did before. However, at the same time, I also applied for instructional design, the education technology major. And fortunately, I got a few offers and I decided to come to the Philadelphia and pursue my first master's degree in learning science and technology at UPenn. It was a great, at least for me, a great education experience to fly from China to the States and just embedded myself in a completely different culture, environment as an international student. So I took the class and I was thinking about I still need to apply for the UX design master program again. It works for me to try again. I took a few of the design class as my electives at UPenn. So I create and made it into my portfolio. Fortunately, this time, the second try, I got a few offers. I like Seattle, so I end up with going to University of Washington, Seattle to study human-computer interaction design. It took me a couple years from high school to the graduate school, end up with becoming the real product designer or the UX designer. I started just working as a full-time starting in 2018, gaining a lot of experience in different industries. So this is my long journey to become a UX designer.
And then tell me, I'm really curious because I know when I was looking at your background, you also have done a lot in the fine art area. And I'm curious how you started getting into fine art because it doesn't sound like that was any part of your college majors. So when did you start doing fine art? And then how did that play into the UX design?
Yeah, so I actually loved painting and drawing on the paper when I was a little child, but I didn't get any chance to take any formal art education until I went to the University of Pennsylvania where I got my master's degree. So I mentioned earlier for a few of the design class I took, a lot of the design class I took at UPenn was around art installation, biological design, information design. So it's not related to the UX design directly, but it helped me to like shape my like design process and design thinking. I remember that I love observe like what kind of social issue were happening in my environment, in the society, and how could I use like art as a medium to facilitate the discussion around this social issue. I kind of like this kind of feeling about like using the art as a medium, as a tool to discuss some specific issue I care about. But because if you're doing the art, you can actually solve this issue, you can actually address these problems. So that is actually one of another motivation. I want to become the user experience designer because maybe I can develop or create some tangible solution that solve this problem I observe.
I love that. And then tell me, I know in some of your other areas, you talk a lot about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. How do you leverage storytelling in your UX design work, and why is it so important?
That's a great question. I think this is something I didn't know when I was the design school student. I really care about like how I make like every like design artifact beautiful and pretty, how I can make it visually appealing. However, I start my like first job and working as a like UX designer. I realized like, how important your communication, your presentation it is, because you have to leverage this storytelling skill to communicate with different people, including like the people from like the design manager or the designer on your team. Also, you have to just talk to a lot with your product manager, engineer. So it's kind of leverage the storytelling technique to make sure that people can understand what you are talking about, why you made this kind of design decision, especially from the business like partner, product manager, and engineering team. So this is the first thing. Like I think soft skill, especially the storytelling skill, is a critical skill every UX designer should have. The second is because if you have this kind of storytelling skill, it's easier for you to share your design work and doing the presentation with different audience. And the third thing is this kind of like works you did in your daily job. Having this kind of storytelling skill is also like crucial, like just in case like if you want to looking for a new job because of laying off, or like if you just want to share your key takeaway or learning or share your design journey with a different audience, leveraging this kind of storytelling skill is very helpful. Yeah. So it's not just like as a designer, we only focusing on like doing our like design works in Figma or in Sketch. We have to show our works with different group of people.
I think this is such a good point, and you brought it up in 3 different examples. And just the one that I was thinking about is that I think it's the second one that you shared, where it's trying to get buy-in or helping people understand why you designed it the way you did. I had this experience recently in my work where I was putting together kind of a social media campaign. It was more a visual messaging campaign. And I had met with my team and talked with them about it, and we put together the background and kind of the goals of it. And then I took that back and put together kind of the imagery and the wording that would go with it, basically the key talking points. But when I sent it back to my team, I did that same thing that you were talking about, telling the story behind it, why I made the design choices I made, what the different images or words represented, so that when they saw it, they were like, oh, that makes sense. And they all loved it. They bought into it. Whereas if I had just gave them the picture and the logo and the image, they may have just discounted it because they didn't recognize the symbolism and the thought behind it. I agree with you. I think that storytelling piece is really important in all areas. And I think it can apply to almost any career anywhere. Tell me, how did you develop your storytelling skills? Because you had this whole background in, other areas and then the art and the design, but how did you really develop that ability to tell the story behind it?
Since I study like Chinese literature, so you can get a kind of sense of I love like writing, I love like reading, and I love sharing story. But all these kind of like reading, like writing practice I did before is in Chinese, a different language than the English. So it took me a while, and I was pretty struggling with like how to tell my story, how to share the projects early on when I like at the school or when I was graduate and looking for my first job, because I didn't know about like how to like tell the story in English, and I wasn't really confident enough to speak something in completely different language. So I was so anxious and nervous when I every time I show up or present my design works in English, actually like took a few of the action items for me to figure out and for me to improve like my storytelling skill. The first thing is definitely like looking for some like English training like session. So I actually booked a few of like 101 with the native speaker, like who can just teach you and correct you like grammar or just correct everything like if you are going to present like something. I was looking for this kind of English training service online and get a few of the 101 with the native speaker. And during this 101, I present my works, my portfolio as a junior designer, and they help me focusing on like some grammar, vocabulary, as well as the transition. And also, most importantly, I learned a lot about like how to tell a story from this kind of 101 mentoring sessions. And the second thing is because I'm looking for more specifically about the product design, UX design job. So I reached out to a few of alumni who graduated from UW, and they were so willing to help and give me the feedback. And I remember like every time like when I was presenting my works, I told them one of the feedback I'm looking for was the structure of the presentation, the overall like storytelling methods I'm using for my presentation. So they will give me more feedbacks on like the story, like how I frame the problems and how I walk through my process during the portfolio presentation. And the third thing was because right now we have so many like free resource online, like YouTube or like just Google it's like storytelling. So I actually like love watching like how other designers present their works on YouTube. So if you search some like design conference on YouTube, you can find a lot of great like video or the recording about their presentations. Especially early on, I just start out as a full-time UX designer. I did spend like at least like watching at least one video every day, and I will take the note about what make their presentation stand out, like how did they structure their story, what is a specific like tips or framework I observe from this watching this YouTube video I can apply to my like next presentation. So I just keep learning and looking for the resource online. The last thing is I know about this is not my strengths areas early on. So I push myself to speak more like in different environment. So when I was at the school, even I wasn't confident enough, I still like trying to speak sometime and present my design work with my classmates, with my teachers. When I was working for my first job, I start to like schedule like weekly like design review where I can present my design work with my internal team for feedback. So I always looking for this kind of design presentation opportunity like externally and internally for me to just keep talking about my design. And eventually I feel like I trained my muscle about speaking my work, speaking about my story and everything about my design journey. Like I get used to it because I practice so many times already. Yeah. So just keep practicing and looking for the feedback.
I'm so impressed with how methodical you were about it and all the different avenues you used to figure out how to tell the story. But then also, given the language barrier, if I remember correctly, you didn't come to the United States until 2015. I don't know if you had English training before then or if it was a completely new language at that point. I mean, it's only been what, 8 years then that you've been here in the United States. And so it's not only all this education in the technical field that you've had to master this piece, but the whole language piece and the amount of time that must have taken, and not just the language, but then the storytelling piece on top of that. It's just incredible. Like, I can't believe you've been able to synthesize all of that in such a short amount of time. Just great job. I just want to say kudos to you. That's amazing. You've been working really hard.
Thank you so much for this messaging. It means a lot to me because I did try so hard for the past few years. And the other thing I want to mention, like early on, I wasn't very confident because of my accent. Like I'm not a native speaker like my colleague or my classmate or my friend did in English. But I feel like right now I become more confident. One is I have this kind of self-confident about like who I am, where I'm come from as a designer. Because of this accent, it actually brings some unique perspective like because I'm more willing to like hear different perspective, hear different feedbacks, have this kind of curiosity too. So I'm very open-minded, like because I'm living in different culture and language environment. I know about like who I am because of my accent and my language background and different background. It makes me like who I am right now as a designer or a human being.
Yeah, no, that's great. Tell me, can you share with our audience what one of your favorite UX design projects is? What was the challenge and how did you solve it?
I think so far, one of my project is the one I'm so proud of is the project I did at Wayfair. So this is the project I'm designing the digital tool for our warehouse packer when they are working on their packing station. They need this kind of digital tool to pack the customer order. In the beginning, one of the challenge I had is I have no idea about what is going on the packing station because I never worked at the warehouse before. The second one is after I start doing the research and flew to the warehouse, I start to realize even the packing seems very easy, but they have to deal with so many different tools. We have so many legacy tools in our like old system. So they have to switch between different like digital tool, digital legacy tool. And sometimes they also using like the paper or the notebook to document it. So it's a mixed with like multiple legacy digital tool plus some physical. I need to really like just take a time, talk to these warehouse people and really understand like what is the pain point and what is the friction point during their like packing workflow. So I flew to the warehouse a lot and just spend the entire days on our warehouse and doing this kind of discovery research. And during the design process, I did a few like design prototype and I flew to the warehouse again and present and share this prototype with our warehouse packer that then just tried like prototypes at their packing station. And I also figure out some like usability issue I need to fix for my prototype. So because of like a lot of round of iteration, design exploration, and usability testing, it ended up with a very like simple like consolidating tool that help the packer to do their job easier. So they don't have to switch into different packing tool to figure out like the customer order information and print out their shipping label. They're just using our one simple tool to do their works because we start to roll out into like 1 or 2 warehouse in the beginning. And then we start to hear some feedback from the folks in other warehouse. They ask our team about when this new tool will be rolling out to our warehouse because we hear a lot of great feedback from other like packers who have been using it for a while because it's so simple and straightforward to use. And eventually it has a great like business metric and business outcome. And this project also be called out by Wayfair CEO on our company like email about like how successful it was. Not only it speed up the packing process, but it also creates the great positive impact on our end customer. Because if the packer, they can pack the thing correctly and safety, when the customer receive our Wayfair package, they can get it quicker, the item without any damage.
Yeah, that is such a success story. I love hearing it. And I think the part that I like most about it is the way you talked about going back and forth between the manufacturing plant and really doing that research. And, you know, you design it once and then you go get feedback, right? And you see like how it works, what part doesn't work. You talk to the people on the ground who are going to use the tool to figure out, you know, how can we make it better? What are we missing? I think that's so valuable in the design process and one that sometimes gets overlooked, especially with maybe new designers to the field. They're just not aware of the need to really collaborate with the people in the company, right? So just remembering that those stakeholders are really important and really need to work with them and talk with them because they have perspectives that you as a designer may not have. So I love that. Congratulations. That's such an awesome project. Tell me, what's a failure you've experienced that you think many a UX designer headed for, and what advice do you have for them?
As I mentioned earlier, like the designer who graduate from like the design school who have a traditional design background, we might tend to be extremely focusing on pushing the pixel in Figma. However, not only we need to like create the great design like in Figma, but also we need to share out with different audience. We need to show off our like design works with different group audience. So soft skill, communication skill is extremely crucial for designer. We are not just sitting in front of our desktop and looking at the screen and pushing the pixel. We need to just make the design decisions and talk it and share this design decision with different cross-functional partner and share our point of view with rationale. So I think this is something really important. I'm still learning about like how I can be better at presenting my design and sharing the design rationales with my cross-functional team. It's still a learning like process for me, especially right now. A lot of junior or student designer reach out to me for some like design like feedback or for some portfolio feedback, oftentimes doing the design work on their own. But if I ask like, did you share it with like your team, your manager, or your PM or other folks? They had these kind of question marks like when I was talking to them, because they didn't know it's not just about like working on my own. It's about like how you can get alignment with your design when you speak to this cross-functional partner. I think this is something I see it's a lot of, especially junior or student designer, they are not really good at. And the second thing is some designer, they are so focusing on just doing their design thing, but they don't really care about the business strategy or some technical like part, especially if you are working in the industries. When you make the design decision, it's really important for us to balance like user needs, business and technical constraints. It's not about like we want to enhance the user experience, but how we can make sure that the engineering team, they can end up with build your design, because you need to make sure that the design can be built finally by the engineering team so it can benefit your end user, your customer at the end. So this is another part of things I think designers shouldn't ignore, and they need to spend more time to finding creativity through this kind of constraint. How can you like play around and find this kind of creativity through so many constraints like coming from like business, technical, user, or even legal constraints. So there's so many things you need to consider beyond just design.
Two such very good points. And I just wanted to say with your first one, learning to communicate with your manager, your project manager, and really tell your story. I was just thinking when you presented that case about Wayfair and the design project that you did there, you did such a good job of describing it so simply and in a way that anyone could understand. And I've been having conversations with people in communications for the last 3 months for this podcast, right? And there are quite a few people who can't explain these things as clearly and succinctly as you did. I think you're just doing a fabulous job, and it's no wonder that you are seeing as much success as you are. And I know they're complex projects. I know there's so many pieces involved, and you just told us the story on all the relevant pieces so that we could understand and buy in and see the difference that you made. Really well done. And then also your point about designing within the constraints of the business and really being aware of the business and that higher level picture. And I know that's really important to the leaders of companies because they are looking at that higher picture, right? They're not just focused on this one little piece and what this one little piece could do. They're looking at this huge, big picture and how do we move this whole company in this direction? And this is one small piece. So I love your advice to really look at this bigger picture, be aware of it, and design within those constraints so that you can help move that business where they're looking to go. Let's move into our Just Say It questions. These are questions that we ask at the end of every interview. Our first one is, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self when you were just getting started in your career, what would it be?
I feel like I have so many things I want to tell to my younger self. One is don't compare your journey with others. Especially I'm kind of become so anxious because of the peer pressure. Early on, I start looking for my first job and I see my friend who already landed their first job before graduation, which made me feel extremely stressed out. And I start questioning about like, should I become a designer and I like qualify for a design job? So I start to just make a lot of stress on my own because of this unnecessary like peer comparison. So right now, like I think I'm more focusing on myself, focusing on my personal growth, because everyone has their unique journeys. If you focusing on yourself, everything else will follow. I think this is also the second advice I tell myself. Going back to my initial goal, like why I overcome so many like obstacle and challenge. That is because I want to become a designer. So I need to take a step back and looking back about what is my initial goal. My goal is to become a product designer. Don't compare it with other and just focusing on like how you can grow yourself as a designer, because no one else will take the responsibility for your career. You are the only person who can design your career with intentionality. And the last thing is just celebrate each small win. Like for example, if I just complete a small design, I can feel like I'm so happy at that moment because I'm so proud of I can doing the job like in a very like fast-paced environment. And for example, if I complete our episode today, I need to also celebrate on my own. I think just celebrate each small win in your life and work. You don't have to like get a job at this fancy technology company and then you celebrate for yourself. You need to celebrate and proud of yourself for every single little small thing you have made.
I love that advice. And I think it's something that people of all ages can learn from. I love the idea of celebrating each win. But going back to your first piece of not comparing yourself to others, I had an experience many years ago where a colleague of mine invited me out to lunch. And I just thought we were going out to chat and to hear about, what each other had been up to, how things were going. And in the middle of lunch, they said, I have to apologize to you. And they said, I really was upset with you because I felt like you were taking all the resources and you were competing with me in this field. And they were like, so I just started ignoring you and avoiding you. And they like listed all this stuff. And I just sat at that lunch, just kind of floored because I hadn't even noticed. Bad on me. Maybe I should have noticed, but I didn't because I was just so focused on this is where I'm trying to go. This is what I'm trying to do in this role. And I hadn't even noticed that they were upset with me or that they were in competition with me, because to me, speaking to your point, it wasn't a competition, and I'm not good at applying this to all areas of my life. This was just happened to be one where I was like, oh, I think I did that one right, because I was just so focused on trying to do and be the best that I could in that role. So I wasn't looking at other people, and I think it showed because, my program was doing really well, which is why they were upset and trying to compete with me. I don't know. It was really interesting. So I try and personally apply that in other areas where I can just focus on, really trying to do the best I can in the role that I am without comparison.
You didn't know about what kind of thing that person was going through. You just see the result, the good result or good outcome, especially for right now on the social media. People only share something good happening in their life, but we don't know about what kind of thing they have been going through.
Right. And in that case, if they had pulled me aside at some point and said, hey, I'm really curious about this, or could you help me with this, or could you explain why you're doing this? I would have been so open to having that conversation. I just had no idea there was something going on over there, So it's really interesting. Okay, so for our second question, what is one habit that you do daily that you would recommend to our listeners?
Starting from last year, because one of my New Year resolution last year in 2022 was become like physical and mentally like healthier. So I start to like looking for and trying out different exercise. And then I find myself really enjoying doing the Pilates, because one of the principle of doing the Pilates is breathe control. When I am doing the Pilates, I do really focusing on the present moment, focusing on myself, how I can use this specific muscle to do this specific exercise. And like in the life or in our work, there's so many things we can like control. Doing the Pilates is one of a few moments I can control and doing the good thing for myself. So I highly recommend like everyone who can just try out like doing some Pilates.
I think that's great. You're not the first person on our podcast who has mentioned some sort of exercise as that daily habit as something that they would recommend to everyone and that has changed their life. You probably know this, but it's actually one of those fundamental principles of positive psychology, something that helps our mental well-being and helps us just have a more positive outlook on life is just that 20 to 30 minutes of, raising your heart rate, some sort of activity that you enjoy, right? Whether it's walking, running, Pilates, weightlifting, it can really change your outlook in all areas of life. Just that simple act of taking care of yourself each day.
And I just start trying some CrossFit starting from this week. So I already take 2 CrossFit class. It was so intense, way more intense than I thought. But I think for myself, I will just go there maybe 2 or 3 times per week to get used to like CrossFit exercise. And maybe if we check in next year, maybe I go to CrossFit every day. Who knows?
CrossFit is a whole nother level. But no, another really great one, because then it's not only the cardio and the muscle, it's, you know, it's that whole body. So intense. That one's a rough one. That would be a big transition from Pilates to CrossFit. I look forward to hearing about, you know, the new like bodybuilder Minjun. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, hearing about your journey. I just think you're doing amazing things, and your dedication and your methodical way of really thinking through things and finding your pathway. I think it's truly inspiring. Tell me, for our listeners who want to connect with you, where's the best way for them to connect with you?
Best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. I also have the Twitter account, but I'm not using the Twitter a lot, but sometimes. So I will share my link to LinkedIn and my Twitter to the audience.
Perfect. And for our listeners, we'll make sure to put those links in our show notes so that you can find Minjun and you can connect with her. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, Minjun. We have additional resources and links in our show notes at justsayitcommunications.com. Transcripts are up on the website and the video is up on YouTube. My team is Andrea Casas-Topete, Zara Momini, and Shinga Yoshimine. And my name is Rochelle Vidal. If you enjoyed this show, please like and share it. And don't forget to apply what you learn on the show. We hope you'll join us again soon for another conversation.